Round 4 of the 2025 AFL season is here, and today we will be previewing all 8 matches, so stick around, find out who's going to win. Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode number 19 of 2025, which also happens to be episode 100 ever. We did 81 episodes last year, so we've cracked the 100 mark. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, we're a football podcast. We review, preview all games. We check out the stats. We talk about football. We don't talk about any nonsense. We don't do clickbait. We just talk about football. So that's what we'll be doing again today. There's 8 games coming up this week in round 4 of football, so we're going to be going through all 8 of those. Have a look at history of the matchup. We'll have a look at how teams have been rating so far this year, what we expect to see in the football world this weekend, I guess. So that's pretty much the plan for today's episode. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, or the follow button depending on what platform you're watching this on, but make sure you hit it. And also share it with your friends, like the video, give the podcast a rating, all of those things, comment, you name it, do it all. Let's keep grinding, let's keep growing. As always, we do 2 episodes every week. So this is our preview episode that comes live Thursday morning every single week. That's Thursday morning Australian time. And on Monday every week, we have our review episode. Don't have an exact time that they come out each week. It depends on what time the last game finishes each round, and also whether I have time to get it out before I go to work on Monday or not. Otherwise, it comes live on Monday afternoons. It's always Monday, though. Every week, Monday, it goes live. So, enough chit-chat, I guess. Let's jump into the football. That's what we're all here for. There's 8 games this week. Obviously, there is the one bye. Not Gold Coast, Essendon and Hawthorn have the bye this week. So neither of those 2 teams are playing this week, but every other team is. And let's jump into them. First up, it's Thursday night football, and it's Collingwood v the old rivals, Carlton. Thursday night football at the MCG. Obviously, Collingwood coming off the bye, they're 2-1 for the season. Carlton, they did play last weekend. They played last Friday. They lost a 3rd match for their season, so they're 0-3 after being up at halftime of all 3 of those games, I'm pretty sure, off the top of my head. So 2 completely different starts to the season for these 2 teams. Where does that leave us? I don't know. But we'll have a look at the history of these 2 teams. They typically, pretty much every season, play each other twice. And over the last few years, they've had plenty of close contests. They met twice last year, and Collingwood won by less than a kick both times. In August, in round 21, they played each other, and Collingwood won it by 3 points. They were 5 goals up, I think, early in the last. And then Carlton came home with a rush, had a kick after the siren to win it and missed it. And then the previous meeting was a back and forth battle all day. Collingwood probably wasted some opportunities, but Nick Dacos kicked a goal with about a minute or so to go, maybe 2 minutes, I can't remember exactly how long there was left, but kicked a winner to win by 6 points on that occasion. 2023, Carlton won their second matchup, whereas Collingwood won their first one. And then going back to 2022, their final matchup was that one that you've probably seen the clip of many times, where Carlton were through to the finals looking comfortable. With a quarter to play, they were well and truly home and hosed in that one, and then Collingwood flew home and won it with a goal late in the game from Jamie Elliott. So that's the history. Collingwood probably have the better run of it over the last few years, but there has been plenty of close results between the 2 teams. Obviously, like 3 out of their last 5 have been a kick or so in it. So that's basically the history of the two teams. Where the two teams stand this year so far. Start with the home team, Collingwood. They started their season poorly against GWS with a big loss. They followed it up with a win against Port Adelaide, an absolute domination of Port Adelaide at the MCG. Then the win against the Bulldogs by 6 points. Then the bye, so they were nice and fresh for this one. Obviously, teams haven't been announced at time of recording, but they'll have the one out, which will be Reef McInnes. I think it's pretty clear Billy Frampton will come in for him. Potentially another change with Myercheck fit again. He'll probably, you would imagine, come back into the team. Whether he replaces Mason Cox is probably the most likely, which is a bit unlucky for Cox. He's been pretty important for them over the last year or two, and certainly wasn't bad in his first game of the season against the Doggies. Meanwhile, the other side of the fence, Carlton, 3 losses. They started the season with that disappointing loss to Richmond when they should have absolutely won that one. They were 41 points up and they lost. Followed it up with a pretty solid performance, in all honesty, against Hawthorn. Could have been a win. They were in the game most of the way. They kicked poorly. It was a wet game. They just didn't perhaps have the wheels to go with them late in the game. Lost it by 20. And then last week, lost by 8 points to the Doggies. In a game which, once again, they were well and truly up at certain points of this game, including at half-time, but just didn't run the game out. So for whatever reason, they're not running games out at the moment. I don't think that's something that will continue. At some point, they're going to be running games out, but at the moment, that is a concern. Interestingly enough, something that doesn't happen all too often in football, both of these teams did play the Bulldogs in their last game. Obviously, Collingwood in round 2 and Carlton did in round 3. Collingwood 6-point winners and Carlton 8-point losers. Suggests that this should be a 14-point margin, of course. That is not how football works, but just an interesting little stat there. If you have a look on the screen, if you're watching this, if you're just listening, I will read it out. We've got some ranks there for different things. So this is my All Aussie Rules rating system. We rate every player, we rate every team every single week. And then this is just using averages of those ratings. So it's only early season so far, so we're only using 2025 data here. So things will be pretty volatile for the first 5-6 weeks probably, and then start to even out from that point on. So once we get to probably 5 or 6 rounds, we'll have a better indication, but I'll also have probably a form number as well, which will always show like maybe the last 3 games. But anyway, pretty much all teams except for Gold Coast have played at least 3 games now. Obviously Gold Coast, when we get to them, have only played 2. So the overall rating, Collingwood rank 10th so far this year based on that rating system, whereas Carlton are 14th. So neither spectacular. Collingwood's obviously gets blown down a bit by the fact that they got smacked by GWS. Carlton have actually played a very similar rated game against all 3 opponents so far, which is interesting. Forward line, Collingwood's is currently 10th. They've had a really bad performance against GWS, a really good performance against Port Adelaide, and then a kind of average game against Bulldogs. So 3 completely different games in terms of their forward line there. Their back line's been solid enough, ranked 9th, and their midfield also 9th as well. Whereas Carlton, their midfield is the one part of their game that's kind of keeping them in games. The ruck work of Tom De Koning, Paddy Cripps, and a few of their other midfielders are certainly playing some really good football. Their forward line and back line, maybe not so much. Obviously, last week, Brodie Kemp kicked 5, Charlie Curnow kicked 3, so their forward line is starting to show some signs that it is getting there, but overall for the season has been a little bit down. Same with their defence. Wiedering is obviously an absolute gun. He's been playing really well. Jack Silvani has shown some signs last week and in round 1, that he's going to make it as a key defender, so that's positive signs as well. Overall, what do we make of this matchup? I think you're pretty silly if you're going to write off Carlton in this one. They haven't had the best start to the season, but, I mean, they've been in all 3 games. They've lost 3 games for the season for a combined total of, 41 points. So, just over 10 points a game. And one of them was against the informed Hawthorn, who hasn't lost a match yet, and they only lost by 20 points. So, certainly don't write off Carlton, is what I'm saying. Based on the history of this matchup, based on a lot of things, I think we have to tip Collingwood. In all honesty, they're coming off the bye. Most things just point towards them being the one to tip in this. But I'm not doing it with confidence. I'm going with them, but not with confidence, is basically what I'm saying here. So yeah, that's everything I have for Collingwood v Carlton Thursday night footy. We jump into Friday night footy, and it's Geelong Melbourne down at GMHBA Stadium, 7:40 PM AEDT, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, which will be local time for Melbourne. This one you would imagine is not going to be quite so close, based on what we've seen so far this year. So we'll just have a look at the starts to the season, I guess, for both teams. Geelong have had an interesting one. They've played 3 games and somehow only won one of them. So they started the season with an absolute demolition down at GMHBA Stadium against Fremantle, where they won by 86 points or 76 points, or whichever one it was, in an absolute clinic that they put on. They followed it up with going to their bogey ground against pretty much probably their biggest bogey team at the moment in the competition, which is St Kilda, and looked like they were going to get thrashed. They came back in the last quarter, but lost by 7 points. And then week 3 up at the Gabba in the wet against the Brisbane Lions, things did not go great for them again. They looked like they were going to win it. Early in that, or most of the way through the second quarter, they were 20, 30 points up, somewhere around about there. But Brisbane just showed more fight, came back strong, and in the end, Brisbane won it by 9 points. So 2 losses in a row for the Cats is not ideal. Combined 16 points for those 2 losses. But they get the perfect situation here coming up against Melbourne to turn their season back around into the sort of form that they want to be playing. Melbourne's season started pretty well, in all honesty. GWS at MCG, they looked like they were going to be winning that one. GWS obviously were playing their second game of the year. Melbourne led most of the way, but GWS just got over the line in the wet down at the MCG. Lost it by 3 points to the Demons. They followed it up with a really weird performance against North Melbourne, where I won't say they were in it. They were always kind of trailing. North Melbourne always kind of looked the better team. It was 18 points, though, at 3/4 time before North Melbourne absolutely destroyed them in the early moments of that last quarter. I think they kicked 6 goals in 10 minutes to just absolutely blow them out of the park. And, yeah, ended up being a 59-point loss for the Demons. And then followed it up again. So all 3 games they've played have been in Melbourne, and this is obviously a 4th one in Victoria, but they are going to GMHBA here. They got blown out of the water by Gold Coast. Half-time again, it was pretty close. Both teams were kicking very poorly in front of goal, but the second half, Gold Coast turned it absolutely on. Gold Coast do look good, don't get me wrong, but they did destroy the Melbourne team that day. History of this matchup, last year they just met the once. They pretty much only meet once a year, over the last few years at least. Last year Melbourne won it by 8 points, which was a little bit of a surprise result, because at that point I think Geelong hadn't lost a game, if my memory serves me correct. I could be wrong, but from memory they hadn't lost a game. Melbourne were doing okay, in all honesty. They were winning most of their games. They'd won a couple in South Australia against both Adelaide and Port Adelaide, but they had also lost at home against Brisbane. So they were having a weird sort of season already, Melbourne, at that point, and that kind of just continued throughout. But Melbourne got the win over Geelong in a semi-upset from memory. So that was last year. 2023, they only met once again. And Geelong won that one by 15 points. Obviously, Geelong missed finals that year. Melbourne did finish top 4. And then you go back to 2022, the year that Geelong did win the premiership. Geelong won that one by 28 points over Melbourne. So a little bit of each way at times, but Geelong did win the 2 home games of theirs, whereas Melbourne won the time that they were the home team. Basically, it's pointing a long way towards Geelong, isn't it? We have a quick look at my All Aussie Rules ratings. We've got overall rating Geelong 4th so far this year, even though they're 1 win and 2 losses. That 1 win was really good. Their 2 losses were close. Melbourne, they're ranked 16th so far. They're one of the lowest ranked teams, obviously 3rd lowest. Things not looking great for them early season. Plenty of time to turn it around, but they need to show a lot more. Forward line rankings for both teams. Geelong's is ranked 9, whereas Melbourne's is so far this season the worst forward line in the competition. Not a good sign for them there. Backline, this is where the one area that Melbourne look okay, and that's their backline. They are under the pump quite a bit so far this season. They've held up okay. I mean, they have conceded some big scores. You look at 120 against Gold Coast and 125 against North Melbourne. Doesn't make it look like their defence is doing all right, but they have been absolutely pumped in the midfield, which has not allowed the backline much stability or ability to keep teams to low scores. Like, you look at certainly the North Melbourne game, I think it was, North Melbourne got 7 goals from the centre bounce, which is ridiculously high. I know that is the highest return this season from centre bounce scoring. When your opposition is getting it out of the middle that easy, it's going to be hard to defend. That's when it's 6v6v6. Put one too many sixes in there, but 6v6 in that defensive line, and that's when it's going to be the hardest. And if teams are dominating that area, that's where it's probably the easiest to score. And then you look at the midfield ranks. Geelong's is 10th, Melbourne is 15th. There's probably a lack of stars, maybe sometimes for Geelong in that midfield. They kind of have shared the load over recent years. Bailey Smith, obviously, first game of the year was outstanding. Missed week 2, was pretty solid in week 3, so I think he adds a little bit more depth. They'll probably be looking to maybe move that up a little bit to a higher ranking throughout the season. Melbourne's should be a lot higher. They have some stars in that midfield. Max Gawn, one of the best ruckmen in the competition over the last 10 years, if not the best. So he's been a bit down on form over the last couple of weeks. Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, they have plenty of stars. They're just not getting the job done at the moment in that midfield line, and they're getting beaten constantly by their opposition. So I think that's probably one of the more important things for the Demons here is to get that midfield line rolling, which will allow their defense to work better and keep teams to lower scores. Basically, you're going to be hard fought to find someone that's tipping against Geelong in this one. I think, based on everything we can see, it looks clear that Geelong will go in heavy favourites. We'll jump into the next game, which will be Saturday afternoon, and this is game of the round, you would have to imagine. It's Gold Coast Adelaide, 2 undefeated teams heading it off at People First Stadium on the Gold Coast. Looking at it, we've got Gold Coast, who have played 2 games. Adelaide obviously have played 3, starting with the home team, who haven't had a home game yet this year, and their home form last year was outstanding. That's the Gold Coast Suns. They started in round 1 with almost a 100-point win, 80-odd points against West Coast over at Optus Stadium. West Coast looked like witches' hats that day. I don't know how much we can take out of that one. They obviously then followed it up against the Demons at the MCG and absolutely turned them into witches' hats, especially in that second half. So they've had 2 outstanding wins to start their season. Meanwhile, over the other side, Adelaide have also had a cracking start to this year without looking like losing a match yet. Started against St Kilda at the Adelaide Oval with a resounding 60-odd point win where it was pretty much over in the first quarter. Week 2 they went to the MCG and took on the Bombers in an absolute shootout. Ended up being 40 goals kicked in that match and 25 of them went to the Crows. And then week 3 they cracked the 100 for the 3rd week in a row, scoring 114, winning reasonably comfortably against North Melbourne at Adelaide Oval. It wasn't the most dominant win of all time, but they never really looked in much danger in that one. So both teams undefeated, 5 wins, 0 losses between the two, and all 5 of them have been quite comfortable victories. Both teams have scored over 100 points in every match they've played. An average of about 80 odd against for Adelaide, whereas Gold Coast, defense has been conceding a lot less. However, I'd probably say so far this year Adelaide have probably played the harder opposition if you're just looking at it that way. These two teams haven't met since round 1 last year, which was a wet game up on the Gold Coast. Gold Coast ended up winning it by 6 points. However, going into the last quarter, they were about 30 points up in the pouring rain and it looked like there was no chance Adelaide were coming back. But they certainly did come back and nearly stole it. But in the end, just couldn't quite get there, basically, is what happened. You go back to 2023, they played twice that year. The game on the Gold Coast was won by the Suns. The game in Adelaide was won by the Crows. So home teams have been winning this matchup over the last couple years. What do we make of it? Gold Coast are going to go in favourites. Not massive favourites, but they will go in favourites based on the fact that it is a home game for them, I think, is basically where we're at. Both teams have very high hopes for this season. If you look at my ranking system, it's the number 2 team in Gold Coast hosting the number 1 ranked team so far this year in Adelaide. It's a juicy matchup. It's one that a lot of things we're going to find out about both teams, I think, here in this game. If Adelaide win this, it sets them up big time because their next couple of weeks, obviously, it's gather round and then they're back at home, I think. I could be wrong. Maybe it's an away game after that. But either way, if they go to 4-0 here with the gather round match the following week, things are looking quite juicy for them. Meanwhile, Gold Coast, if they can get this win heading into gather round, also would be massive for them to go 3-0. They've had a fantastic start to their season and it would be huge. Both forward lines functioning really well. I think that's probably... both teams aren't that dissimilar when you look at them. Their midfields are really good. Top 2 midfields so far in the competition this season. As well as 2 of the top 3 forward lines in the competition. And both of their back lines maybe not so good. Also due to the fact that their back lines haven't seen as much of the ball because their midfields are dominating, and as is their forward lines. However, that's probably where this game's going to be won and lost, I guess, is whose forward line destroys the back line of the opposition, the better. It hopefully will be a bit of a shootout. Both teams playing very attacking football so far this year. I would like to see it be a really competitive game where the midfields are going head-to-head, banging against each other, forward lines getting goals. They've both got some good tools, good smalls around them. It should be an entertaining game. I could quite happily tip either of these teams to win this game and be quite content with the result no matter which way it goes. I'm probably going to go with Gold Coast just due to that home factor. They only lost 1 game at home last year, which was obviously right towards the end, or their last home game, I think, for the season. So, I'm pretty happy, I think, tipping Gold Coast, but I would not be at all in the slightest surprised to see the Crows win this one. Jumping into the next game, it's Richmond v the Brisbane Lions. It's at the MCG, Saturday evening, 4:15 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. What to say about this? Two teams in two different spots. We say it every week with Richmond. Look, they haven't been terrible, Richmond, so far this year, and Brisbane have not been outstanding, but they've been getting the job done. So Richmond, obviously, have played 3 games. They won their first one against Carlton, followed it up by getting smashed by both Port Adelaide and St Kilda. St Kilda, they were in that game until half-time. The second half went atrociously bad, though. It was just an absolute clinic that St Kilda put on in that second half. Whereas you jump across to the Brisbane Lions, they're 3-0 this season. All kind of tight games, in all honesty. Week 1, they went to the SCG, played Sydney, and won by 4 points. It was a good game. Not the most high-quality game, but certainly a close game. Week 2 was a home game against West Coast, one that they were probably expected to absolutely dominate after Gold Coast had destroyed West Coast the week before. But West Coast put up a little bit of a fight. That was West Coast's best performance this year. Brisbane won it by 19 points in the end. Reasonably comfortably, but certainly not as comfortable as we expected. And then week 3, as we mentioned before, they played Geelong. They won it by 9 points. Once again, slow start. They started slow in all 3 games this year, which is something they probably need to find a way to turn around a bit and get better starts, because you're not going to get away with slow starts all year long. But they certainly have so far. So they're 3-0. You look at the history of this matchup, it's all Brisbane. Even going back 2022 when Richmond weren't quite so bad. I mean, Brisbane are an absolute powerhouse of the competition and have been for the last few years. Obviously winning the premiership last year, losing the grand final the year before. But they met in round 10 last year, which was right at the peak of Richmond's injury list concerns, and Brisbane smoked them by 119 points. 2023 was the same result. They've been playing at the Gabba recent years, so playing at the MCG this year will help Richmond a little bit probably, but I don't think it'll be enough. So 119 points last year, 81 point margin in 2023, and then you go back to when they met in a qualifying final in 2022, and Brisbane won that one by 2 points as well. That might have been an elimination final, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, not that it matters too much. So, yeah, massive favourites will be Brisbane going into this. If we look at my rankings for this game, Richmond 17th overall, Brisbane 5th overall. Massive discrepancy there. Forward line, Brisbane's forward line has not been working that well so far. It's their biggest issue. I think it was their biggest issue for a fair chunk of last year as well. They managed to resolve it late in the season by finding lots of different options to goals, and that's probably where they're going to have to go again this year, especially now that Joe Danaher's not there. But their forward line's still a lot better than the Richmond forward line, which is very young. The back line, Brisbane's back line is outstanding, second best ranking so far for the competition, whereas Richmond's is down all the way down in 15th, and then midfield battle as well. This is probably where Richmond have their most experience, but it just hasn't been functioning that well so far this year. And you'd imagine the Brisbane midfield, which is very, very deep, should be able to take care of this Richmond midfield quite easily, I would imagine. Expect the big Nank to have a big day, but I don't know who else from that Richmond lineup will have a big day. Maybe nobody. So that is Saturday evening footy. We go to Saturday night football. Wrong one. There we go. And we got North Melbourne hosting Sydney at Marvel Stadium. This is actually almost the second best game of the round, I reckon. This could be an absolute cracker. We got Sydney going in as favourites. North Melbourne hosting, though. North Melbourne haven't been terrible this season. Both teams going in 1 win, 2 losses. North Melbourne, obviously, slightly better percentage. Not obviously, but they do have slightly better percentage. They're 10th on the ladder. Sydney are 11th. We look at the last 3 matches, the only 3 matches that both teams have played. North Melbourne started the season pretty well. Just a 16-point loss to the Bulldogs. Undermanned Bulldogs, but a Bulldogs team that's played pretty well so far this season. So that's not a bad loss in my eyes. They followed it up with that really resounding victory over Melbourne in round 2, where they ended up winning by 59 points. And then round 3, they went across to Adelaide Oval to play the informed Crows. And they weren't ever really in the game, but they showed some good signs. They've certainly shown some development signs this year. I think that's certainly a better team than last year, and for that reason, I just have this sneaky feeling that they might be able to pull off the upset against the Swans here. Meanwhile, over the other side of the park, it's the Sydney Swans. They started opening round against Hawthorn, hosting Hawthorn. They were in that game right until about halfway through the last quarter. They made an error in the back line, which gave up a goal and gave up momentum, and that was kind of where it went. They lost that one by 20 points. Round 1, they played against the Brisbane Lions, once again at home, so 2 home games to start their season. And once again, another blue in their backline probably cost them this game. Ended up losing by 4 points, which is less than a kick, and they did give away an uncontested turnover in their backline that cost them a goal. And then round 2, they turned that around. Against Fremantle over in the West, they looked to be trailing most of the day. Freo kind of looked like they were in control certainly early, but Sydney came home well and managed to get a goal through Joel Amartey to put them in front with a few minutes to go. Fremantle kept fighting but couldn't get over the line, so Sydney won that one by 3 points. So pretty close games all around for Sydney. Their season could be almost 3-0 in all honesty, but it also could be 0-3 very easily. So interesting start to their year. Kangaroos certainly look like a team on the up. I don't know if I'm convinced that Sydney are going to be able to continue their great season from last year, where they were really good in the home and away season. You look at the history of these two teams. Last year they met just the once, which was round 18. Sydney won it by 79 points. That was up in Sydney though. Comfortable winners. You go back 2023, North Melbourne didn't have a great year, but hosting Sydney, and they nearly won it. They only lost by 3 points in a pretty high scoring game in all honesty, 90-93. So a pretty good performance that day from North Melbourne. And then 2022, Sydney won it by 38 points in round 21. So Sydney have taken all the results, but you look at last time they played it in a home game for North Melbourne, it was less than a kick in it. So maybe, just maybe, the upset is on the cards. If you look at the rankings that I have for both teams, you'd definitely say North Melbourne are a chance in this one. Whether that's false hope, I don't know. Overall ranking, North Melbourne 8th, Sydney 15th. It's the North Melbourne forward line. Efficiency plus. They were last year. They were very straight in front of goals, and they just kept themselves in games because of that. The second best forward line so far this year, whereas Sydney are really struggling in 15th. The back line of Sydney is really holding together really well, though. For the amount that they've been under the pump, they've been holding together quite well, 7th best, whereas North Melbourne, maybe not so much. They have conceded over 100 2 out of the 3 weeks so far. They are 14th best backline. And the midfield battle, both teams kind of lowly ranked at the moment. Sydney's midfield has underperformed. There's no doubt about it. I think they're missing Errol Goulden quite a lot. And interestingly enough, Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner have not both had a good game at the same time this year. Chad Warner, pretty much one's been good and the other one hasn't each week. So, if they get going in the midfield, it's certainly going to be a dangerous team to beat. North Melbourne probably a lot younger overall in that midfield. But they have added the experience, like Caleb Daniel off the back line has really given them something. Jack Darling in the forward line has given them another target. You chuck in Luke Parker, who's obviously playing against his old team here. He's been really good. I think Jai Simpkins having a career best year so far this year. His pre-season and his first few weeks have looked really, really good. So this North Melbourne team is certainly growing and getting better, and one to look forward to, I think. Will they be able to get over the line here? I'm not fully convinced, but I certainly am not writing their chances off. Let's just put it that way. Moving into Sunday games. The first one is GWS v the Eagles. It's at NG Stadium. Home game for GWS. I think this should be their first home game since opening round, so that's been a little bit of time. Pretty much almost a month. West Coast have not had a great start to the season, so two teams in completely different spots. Obviously, GWS are 2-1, sitting fifth on the ladder. Their first loss coming last week. Meanwhile, West Coast are 0-3, and in all honesty, haven't really looked like winning a match. GWS, week 1, won by 52 points over Collingwood in a really, really good performance. Week 2, just snuck over the line over Melbourne. Wasn't their best performance, but they did get the win, and that's all that matters in the end. They got their 3 points. Early season, you just want wins. You can worry about the nitty-gritty and the tidying things up later in the year. Getting early season wins is very important. And then week 3, obviously last week, they had the bye in round 2. So round 3, they came back. They went down to Launceston and played against Hawthorn in a windy game. They were 5 goals up with the wind, obviously, in the first quarter. And then kind of just lost their structure, lost their game plan, and just fell apart a bit to end up losing that one by 12 points. Meanwhile, West Coast, they started their season getting absolutely thrashed by Gold Coast in round 1. Round 2, they were a lot better against Brisbane, but once again lost. And then round 3 was the derby over in the West, and they only lost by 38 points, but it felt like it probably should have been more than that. They just were never in that game against Fremantle. So 3 disappointing games overall for West Coast so far, and at the moment, that you got to think that they're going to be one of the challenges for the Wooden Spoon based on what we've seen. History of this matchup, I mean, it's not going to surprise anyone here, but they only meet typically once a year. Last year, it was in round 2. GWS won it by 65 points, so it's pretty much been a year, just slightly over since they met. But GWS smoked them there. 2023, surprisingly enough, West Coast actually won that game over in the West, but GWS, yeah, I don't know, that's a weird result. That was also round 2. So the last couple of years, this is 3 years in a row that they met very early in the season. And then the year before was once again in Sydney, and GWS won that one by 52 points. It's at NG Stadium. Everything points towards this being a pretty comfortable win for GWS, you would expect. Overall in rankings, my rankings so far this year, GWS overall 9th, West Coast 18th. The forward line for GWS is ranked 7th, and hopefully, for their sake, will only get better, because they've only had Jesse Hogan for 1 game. Stringer's only played 1 game. You'd think that their forward line is going to get better and better. Meanwhile, West Coast forward line is 17th, ranked 2nd last so far this year. For context there, they scored 49, 75 and 68. They haven't got past 75 yet in a game. Backline, GWS's backline is outstanding. There's no doubt about it. Their tolls are great. Their small, mid-sized defenders are also very, very good. West Coast backline is ranked 12th. And then midfields, GWS midfield has kind of been underperforming outside of week 1 against Collingwood. The next 2 weeks, they've almost been beaten. But I don't think you can expect that to happen all season long. Their midfield has some big names, has some good players, but they do tend to rank slightly lower than their opposition quite regularly. Meanwhile, West Coast, their midfield is the worst in the competition so far this year. They are definitely missing Elliot Yeo, and we haven't seen much of Harley Reid yet this year. He certainly hasn't had a great game yet. So I would imagine that this GWS midfield, it is the two lowest rated midfields so far this year, but I would imagine the GWS midfield will be too strong for West Coast. And this game should probably go the way we expect, with a pretty comfortable win for GWS. That leaves us with 2 games to go. Sunday afternoon at Adelaide Oval. It's Port Adelaide St Kilda in what is a very important game for Port Adelaide, and probably less important for St Kilda, but at the same time a really good chance for them to stamp themselves in this race for the finals. I know it's early to be talking finals, but if they were to go 3-1, having beaten 2 teams from the finals last year, you just never know. Anyway, Port Adelaide hosting here. They have played 3 games. They're 1-2. They're 12th on the ladder. Their only win was their game in Adelaide. They started the year with a 91-point loss against Collingwood at the MCG. Round 2, they played Richmond over at Adelaide Oval and absolutely smoked them from start to finish. Week 3, they played against Essendon at Marvel Stadium in what was a weird game where it was just like yo-yo football, just bouncing end-to-end, turnover football, fast-break football. Neither team scoring well, and they never really looked like beating the Bombers. In all honesty, the Bombers should have won by more. Meanwhile, the other side of the fence, St Kilda started really poorly round 1 against Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. So this is the second of 3 trips to Adelaide in the first 5 rounds for St Kilda, which is a bit harsh in all honesty. But schedules, what can you do? So they started pretty poorly that first game. They were never in it. They were blown out of the water in the first quarter. Week 2, though, they showed up and they definitely outplayed Geelong. I was at that game and it just felt like Geelong had no answer for what St Kilda were giving them, and in the last quarter Geelong did come back and almost steal the victory, but St Kilda got their first win of the year and then followed it up. Obviously they were expected to beat Richmond, but they did what Carlton couldn't, and they did beat them. It wasn't the best first half, but their second half was outstanding. So yeah, that's where these 2 teams sit. 1-2 for the Power, 2-1 for the Saints. Port Adelaide are going in quite comfortable favourites, and in all honesty, they probably should. They have to win this. If they don't go winning these sort of games, you can just put a line through their season, in all honesty. They met round 16 last year, sorry. And that was a 2-point win for Port Adelaide. That was in Melbourne, so they only just got over the line, but it was a win nonetheless. And they also met round 7 last year. Port Adelaide won that one by 10 points. That one was in Adelaide. So close games, split them. Yeah, I don't know. It's one that Port Adelaide have a lot riding on this game, whereas St Kilda lose this and you kind of be like, yeah, they weren't expected. Certainly pre-season they weren't expected to win. Rankings this year so far, Port Adelaide's 7th overall, which is kind of surprising when you look at their results. When they got flogged in round 1 and then round 3 they didn't look that great, but round 2 obviously was a very good win. Whereas St Kilda, they're ranked 3 overall so far this year. Whether they'll be able to keep that sort of stuff up, I don't know. But after week 1, their next 2 weeks have been very good. Forward line, both teams pretty good forward line so far, 6th and 5th overall. Port Adelaide 6th, St Kilda 5th. Backlines, once again, both teams pretty solid there. 5th for Port Adelaide, 3rd for St Kilda. And then the midfields is kind of where both teams have been struggling a little bit. Port Adelaide 12th, St Kilda 11th. Connor Rose dominated weeks 1 and 2 for Port Adelaide, and then just really struggled in week 3 in a midfield performance from Port Adelaide that was quite poor, to be completely honest. And then St Kilda, their midfield has looked okay. Certainly not great, but about probably where you'd expect their midfield to be ranked, I would say. You certainly wouldn't expect them to be too much higher, I don't think, judging by names on paper at the moment. Players may improve, we'll see, but yeah, I'm going to tip Port Adelaide. I don't know why. I don't think I should, but I will be tipping Port Adelaide in this one. We move on to what is the final game of the weekend. It's over in the West. It's going to be at 5:10 p.m. Eastern time, which is 3:10 local time over in the West. It's Fremantle Bulldogs in what is another big game. Fremantle are going to be going in favourites to this one. I don't know what to make of either of these two teams so far from what we've seen. Fremantle 1 and 2 sitting 13th on the ladder. Bulldogs 2 and 1 sitting 8th on the ladder. Fremantle started poorly down in Melbourne against Geelong, lost by like 80 points. Followed that up with a 3-point loss to Sydney when, in all honesty, they probably should have won it early on. They were like 4 goals up. They should have just put them away at that point, but they didn't. And then they played West Coast and lost by 38. Oh, won by 38 points, sorry. They definitely won by 38 points. So an interesting 3 weeks to start their year. Interestingly enough, this will be their 3rd week in a row also over in the West. So that also helps them. They haven't had to travel since round 1. So for a Western Australian team, that's really good. Obviously, next week they go to Adelaide for gather round. But those sort of things do kind of look like they favour Fremantle in this one. Jumping across to the Doggies. They started their year with, I won't say a great win, but a solid win against North Melbourne by 16 points. A 6-point loss to Collingwood, which they were certainly in that game. Collingwood wasted opportunities, but the Bulldogs certainly were well and truly in this game. And then week 3 was beating Carlton by 8 points. So 3 interesting games for the Doggies. They're undermanned at the moment. They're missing some of their star players, but the star players that they have left have certainly been playing really well. Sam Darcy providing a great target for them. He's so tall, he's coordinated, he marks it, he kicks pretty well. He's been really good. Libba has been outstanding for them every game. Sam Davidson was outstanding last weekend, as well as Bailey Dale. So a lot of things looking all right for the Doggies. Certainly once they start getting players like Bontempelli and Treloar and Waitman and all these sort of players back, they will be a scary team to go against. At the moment, they're a little bit undermanned, and being over in the West, you'd have to think Fremantle win this. They should win this. If Fremantle don't win this, their season is in a lot of trouble early. Whereas if the Bulldogs win this, they have got their season off to a flyer, and things will only look up for them once they start getting players back. History of the matchup, they met last year in rounds 14 and 7. 14 was Bulldogs' home game, which the Bulldogs won by 67 points. They also met in round 7, which was a Fremantle home game, and Fremantle won that one by 24 points. So home team won both of them last year. And then in 2023, they met in round 16, which the Doggies won. But once again, was a home ground advantage for them. So home team has been getting it done. Dockers go in favourite. Looking at the rankings, there's not too much dissimilar between the two teams. 13th and 11th overall. Doggies slightly above. Forward line's 14th and 8th, so the Doggies forward line certainly playing better, led mainly by Sam Darcy. 13th v 18th in the back line, so the Doggies back line has been not great so far this year. They haven't conceded massive scores, 97, 76, 75, but there's more to defending than just scores against. And then midfields, both teams have been pretty good. Doggies will improve when they get players back. Fremantle probably underperforming for what their midfield is so far this year, but Hayden Young to come back into this midfield will bolster them for sure. Whether that's this week or next week, I'm not sure. If it's this week, that would be huge for them. So overall, I think we go Fremantle just because it's home game for them, and they've probably got more to lose if they were to lose this match. So that's all 8 games this weekend. We'll jump into my tipping now. And here they are. We got, 18 of 27 so far this year. Sorry, I got distracted by something on my screen. I thought that I had something else there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 18 of 27 for the year, so not too bad. We had a good week last week. We went 7 of 8. Hopefully this week we can go 8 of 8. We're going Collingwood on Thursday night. We just can't go against them based on the fact that Carlton have been disappointing so far this year. So yeah, we'll be leading off with that. Geelong should be too good, you would imagine, on Friday night for Melbourne based on what we've seen. I've got them by 30 points. Gold Coast in match of the round against Adelaide. I've got them by 10 points. That is the game I'm most looking forward to seeing this week. It is the one most people should be most excited about watching this week. So put on your KO or your Foxtel or head to the pub and watch that one on Saturday afternoon at 1:20 p.m. Should be a cracker. Brisbane should be way too strong for Richmond. I've got them by 50. North Melbourne, I've gone for the upset here. North Melbourne have beat Sydney by a point. That should be a good game, in all honesty. It might be one of the better games of the round as well. It should be close. GWS should be way too good for West Coast. I've got them by 55 points. Port Adelaide to beat St Kilda by 5 points in what is a crucial game for Port Adelaide. I'm not confident, but we're going to Port Adelaide. And then the final game of the round is Fremantle against the Doggies. And we're going Fremantle by 26. I think Fremantle have too much to play for to lose this one. Could be completely wrong, but that's just my thoughts. That's not usually where we wrap it up, in all honesty. We do our power rankings. But me being me, did kind of forget to create it. I do have where each team is so far at the moment, but I don't have a graphic for it. So I will read them out in order, and this will go on to my socials tomorrow. I will definitely go on my Instagram, so go check that out, at All Aussie Rules, but also it will probably go on my Twitter and stuff as well. So go check all of them out. It was a hard week to do power rankings, let me tell you. I've gone Brisbane on top. They've been on top the whole way. I can't take them off when they're winning. Hawthorn, they're second. They were second the week before. They keep winning, so they stay up there. Third, this is the big mover. I've moved Adelaide up to third. They've been outstanding this year. So they've moved. I couldn't not move them up, so they've gone up to third. GWS lost, but they've stayed fourth for the moment. I'm not convinced with them, but they've stayed fourth. Fifth was Sydney. They had the bye last week. I've kept them there. If they were to lose this week, they will probably drop some spots. Collingwood, they also had the bye, so they've stayed in sixth. The Doggies got the win. They stayed in seventh, though. Couldn't justify moving them above Collingwood based on the fact Collingwood beat them the week before. Gold Coast have moved into the... Oh, no, they were in the 8 already, sorry. They were 8th. They stay 8th. I kind of wanted to move them up, but I just... This week is huge. If they beat Adelaide this week, they will definitely move up. Geelong have dropped. They are the big droppers. They've gone from 3rd to 9th because they've lost 2 weeks in a row. I still think they're one of the best teams in the competition, but based on current form, they just have to drop. St Kilda, they're 10th on rankings, so they moved up a couple spots thanks to two solid weeks in a row. Fremantle, they moved up 2 spots as well thanks to a win over West Coast. It wasn't outstanding, but it was more so the fact that other teams were really bad. Port Adelaide dropped 2 more spots, so they've dropped from 4th pre-season to 6th after opening round to 12th now. So things not looking great for Port Adelaide in that context. Carlton, they dropped a couple spots. They've gone down to 13. They have a chance to start moving up again this week if they can get a win, play a full 4 quarters. The Bombers, they moved up 1 spot, back up to 14th. I just can't justify putting them above Carlton yet. They've only beaten the Port Adelaide at home, so we'll see what they do over the next couple weeks. They obviously have the bye this week. North Melbourne, they dropped 1 spot back to 15th after being 14th the week before, but that's still above where they started in 17th. Melbourne dropped down to 16 last week. They stay 16. Richmond are still in 17th based on the fact that they won their first game, and West Coast have been atrocious this year so far, and they're sitting 18th, and no reason to move them up yet until they win a game. Probably won't move up based on what we've seen so far, unless Richmond absolutely get pumped week in, week out. So that's my power rankings. They will go up on socials tomorrow, or today. By the time this goes out, it'll be today. Tomorrow, based on when I'm recording. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit up all the socials. X, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, all of them. All Aussie rules everywhere. This podcast goes live on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So go check it out on your favourite. Don't forget to check out the YouTube especially, though, because that's where I post extra videos. We'll be pumping out some of them next week, so I appreciate you for tuning in. Don't forget to like it if you did. Hit that like button if you liked it. Hit the subscribe button or the follow button, depending on your platform. And also, don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Let everybody know about All Aussie Rules. We talk football and only football. We don't worry about the clickbait. We don't worry about all the extra nonsense. We're talking football. And that's everything I've got for you. So I'll be back on Monday with a wrap-up of Round 4. Until then, enjoy the football, and I'll catch you next weekend. Or next week. Jeez. Bye.